is Will Stewart, and I'm the Executive Director of Stay, Work, Play New Hampshire, which, if you're not familiar with us, we're a statewide nonprofit whose mission is to attract and retain more young people here in the Granite State. And while we wish we could meet in person like we did at last year's inaugural New Hampshire Next event, it's great that we have the option to connect virtually so that we can learn together all week long. Our primary goal for New Hampshire Next is to inspire and educate New Hampshire change makers to create positive change in their communities and the state as a whole. So thank you for joining us here today and for your desire to make New Hampshire a better place. Before we jump into today's exciting session with Deo, I'd like to take a moment and thank Dartmouth Hitchcock Health for their sponsorship of New Hampshire Next. As everyone knows, Dartmouth Hitchcock is a leading employer here in New Hampshire and a great partner for Stay, Work, Play and many, many other nonprofits and organizations across the state. And these days, of course, they're on the front lines of the battle against COVID-19. So really, for all these reasons, I'd like to thank Dartmouth Hitchcock on behalf of all of us for their support today. And without their support, this event simply would not be possible. So thank you. And to say a few words on behalf of Dartmouth Hitchcock,
I'm Sarah Courier, the Vice President of Workforce Strategy at Dartmouth Hitchcock Health.
Hold on.
And
Sorry. Continue, Will.
Introduce Sarah Courier, who is, as she says, Dartmouth Hitchcock's Vice President of Workforce Strategy. So let's hear from Sarah now.
I'm Sarah Courier, the Vice President of Workforce Strategy at Dartmouth Hitchcock Health, and I'm excited to welcome you to Stay, Work, Play New Hampshire's second annual New Hampshire Next Summit for Young Changemakers. You may have noticed, in the spirit of change, that this second conference looks a little bit different from the first one. For the time being, the way we work and play has shifted, but I would suggest that there's never been a stronger reason for people to stay in New Hampshire. Working in healthcare has given me a front row seat to see how our communities have rallied to support one another. From our frontline workers who are caring for patients, people who are cleaning our buildings and selling us groceries and keeping us connected, to the many, many volunteers and individuals who are supporting local restaurants by sending meals to our hospital workers or helping us find solutions to childcare challenges, I want to say thank you and highlight that this sense of community spirit is what makes New Hampshire special and a great place to live. We know how to show up for each other, even when showing up means staying at home. One could argue that we don't need change makers right now. Change has happened. The world is suddenly on a new path, one that we've never experienced before and one where the rules seem very different. However, with all this change, what we do need is difference makers. People with ideas who can take these changes and transform them into something better. I'm confident that you change makers, the New Hampshire Next speakers and attendees, are the innovative, transformational thinkers to make that happen. The ability to bring a vibrant, talented group like this together to share ideas is just one of the reasons Dartmouth Hitchcock Health values our partnership with Stay, Work, Play. We see firsthand what a difference each and every community member can make, and we are eternally grateful for the support we receive and the opportunity to be there for our patients and our community during this time of need. I'm reminded of the Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt what a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can do to change the world, or in our case, to change New Hampshire. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And with that, change makers, welcome to New Hampshire Next.
Well, thank you, Sarah. And again, thank you to the entire Dartmouth Hitchcock team for your support of New Hampshire Next, a summit for young changemakers. And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, who will kick off this year's New Hampshire Next Summit with some words of inspiration. So for those of you who don't know him, Deo Mwano is a social impact innovator whose work is focused on education, technology, business, community, and individual development. Deo earned his BA in International Relations and History and an MBA in Strategic Leadership. He has worked for the US State Department, nonprofits, educational institutions, and tech startups. Deo was named to the Union Leaders 40 Under 40 class of 2016 and is a 2017 graduate of Leadership New Hampshire. Working with organizations nationally and internationally, Deo is a sought-after speaker, program designer, community builder, and performer. Today, Deo runs his own consulting firm, Deo Mwano Consultancy, which offers multidisciplinary services including speaking, training, creating engaging empowerment content, leading workshops for businesses and nonprofits, and school integration, performing, and visual arts to ignite audience participation and ownership. I will note, if you have any questions for Deo throughout the presentation, please send them in the chat function down at the bottom, and he'll be sure to address them at the end. And with that, please join me in welcoming Deo Mwano. Deo, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Will. And thank you so much for Stay Workplace staff for inviting me to be here with you guys. I'm super pumped. And just to make sure that you guys can hear me. So just give me a little thumbs up. All right, perfect. Awesome. I'm just going to share my screen here real quick. I am super pumped to be here with you guys. I actually attended the conference last year and I had a lot of fun. And I'm very grateful to be able to be invited to come and present with you guys today. I am, as you can tell, I'm wearing a blazer and a tie. This has been the theme lately for a lot of my virtual presentation. I think it's because I'm not seeing people as much, so I'm not dressing up as much. So like when I get an opportunity to present and share, I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to wear a blazer and a tie. Where some of you guys know me, like usually when you see me out and about at different stuff in the community, I never wear a tie or a blazer. So that's a little bit of a change happening. But anyway, so I am pumped to be here. And for my presentation today, I actually wanted to start off with a short little video. And this video, I'm going to give you a little bit of context. I have 3 children. My oldest is 7, and then I have a 5-year-old and also 3.5, almost 4. My 2 oldest, this past weekend, we decided to get them some new bicycles, and I was a little aggressive as a father. I was like, you know what? Like when we get these bikes, we're just gonna take the training wheels out, and they're just gonna have to master it. Come to my surprise, they actually they were doing an awesome job. But my second child kind of like mastered it on the spot. He's never ridden a two-wheeler before without training wheel, and he just like mastered it. And I'm looking at my oldest son, and I'm like, oh man, I really hope that he gets to like figure this out like right away. At first, when I got the bicycle for them, I was like, you know what? They're just gonna practice balance, right? Like they might not be able to pedal right away. So the video that I'm sharing is actually what ended up happening. So I bought it on Saturday, and then the following video is actually from Sunday. So I'm going to show you guys real quick. The one with the red helmet is my middle child, and then my oldest is the one with the blue shirt. And then my daughter is the one with the pink shirt. So I decided Sunday morning, just like ad hoc, I was like, you know what, like I'm gonna take them to like an open parking lot where there's nobody there, no cars, and I'm gonna see what happens, right? So like my second child kind of mastered it to a certain extent, and my oldest was still very much so struggling. And I thought about it, I looked at our parking lot where we live, and I was like, you know what, like it's kind of long enough for them to be able to figure it out. But then I was like, I'm gonna take them in an open space and see what happens. And come to my surprise, as you can tell, my oldest was riding the green bike. He's cruising, he's ready to go. And come to my surprise, they were actually both ready. They were ready for this experience. And as a father, it was such an interesting experience to me, because I'm like, man, like Eli was like struggling in our parking lot, our little driveway, he was struggling there, but now we brought him out to an open parking lot and he's just cruising. And to me, it was one of those things where like sometimes the challenges that we experience in life, we sometimes feel that we don't have the ability to be able to demonstrate what we're capable of. But sometimes the bigger the challenge, the bigger the problem is actually the more that we can actually be able to contribute and be able to bring our skill set and what we have to offer. So I thought maybe opening with this little video would be kind of encouraging for you to see. As you know, we are all dealing with the impact of the coronavirus, and in result of that, we've had to kind of shift, right, and find new ways of interacting, engaging, finding different ways to connect with our family members, our friends virtually. And I just want to say, and I would just want to encourage you that regardless of how difficult things are right now, you have the capability to continue to push forward by the strength that you have and the inner power that you have. Sometimes you just have to channel it. So my name is Deo. I am pumped to be here with you guys, and I wanted to open up my slides with a little bit of the video of my kids being able to conquer the bicycle challenge yesterday. I'm based in Manchester. I run a consultant business where I work with education institutions, businesses, and communities. So different community initiatives here in New Hampshire, here in Manchester, and also different places throughout the country. One thing that's really interesting about the work that I do is that it's multimedia and multifaceted, meaning one day I might be working with college students and I'm presenting on what does it mean to have your own personal brand. And then another day I might be sitting on the panel talking about how do we create a space to be more welcoming for our immigrant communities. And then another day I might be talking to teachers about, hey, what do you need to do in order to leverage your student involvement and your student engagement? And sometimes you might find me talking to a former mayor or the former police chief about how do you have civil discourse around some of the social issues that we experience in our community. So my consultant work is kind of very much so 360 regarding the work that I'm doing. But one of the key things around the work I do, it's really around relationship building. I spend a lot of time getting to know organizations and folks that I'm working with in order to better figure out what can I provide that will differentiate the services that they're providing, but also for them to build stronger relationships with the communities that they work with. So the title of my presentation today is Bring Your Positive Intention to Life to Make an Impact. A lot of times people think about an impact in terms of externally, right? How other people benefit from what you have to offer. I wanted to take a different approach to this presentation. As you can tell, I'm used to like moving around. I wanted to take a different approach to this presentation. The focus for me is to look at how can you actually influence yourself to make an impact for yourself. A lot of times we think externally in terms of making impact for other people's life and folks who are around me or causes that are associated. Those are all awesome. Those are all amazing. But sometimes we forget about how do we make an impact for ourselves. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to unpack this, and hopefully you get the tools to figure out what does it look like for you on where you are now and where you're going. And then hopefully that also trickles down within the community that you are involved with. So the way that I started off when I started looking at how to break this apart, our intention is essentially our being, meaning it's who we are in terms of, it comes from who we are and what we sense, right? What we want to do, what our intentions are. And most of the times, the reason why I'm focusing on the positive intention is because that's really where, you know, I want to go in the positive route, right? I don't want to go in the negative route within this presentation. But our being is essentially, in essence, of it's the nature or essence of a person, right? So when people say, who are you? You say, I am this, I am that. And for some of us, we get really pumped when it comes to talking about our intention. And a lot of times we see it come to life when we are advocating for something, or when we are talking about something that we are passionate about. You know, we get to see that, those intentions, and hopefully it comes across and people get to see you. But the reality is sometimes our intentions don't come to life, right? It's something that we hold on to within our being, but we really don't get a chance to actually like do things that get to indicate how we feel internally. So the way that I broke down the presentation really is around the being and the doing. So the being is how our influences, how the being influences our doing. Because the intersection between the doing is actually you being able to say, hey, this is my intention. This is what I want to do. And then how is it actually coming to life? So when I broke down the definition of this presentation around bringing your positive intention to life to make an impact, I thought about it from a really application standpoint. Like, how do we actually apply this? And then the impact is actually measured by what we do, right? Our doing. That's how people can actually measure it. So your intention could never be measured unless you actually act upon it. Right? How many times have you guys have fought with someone or argued with someone because someone didn't truly understand what you meant by something? And then what do you usually say? You say, my intention was this. I intended to. So it's very important to think of that, because sometimes how we feel internally doesn't really necessarily come out externally. So in this presentation, I want to kind of help break that apart so you can find the connection for you personally of what that looks like. So starting off with a little bit of who I am and my background. And part of this presentation, I wanted for you guys to kind of get a sense of why certain stuff that I'm engaged with today, why am I so passionate about it, and why do I allocate and advocate time in order to actually do it? So part of my intention of how I see myself today comes from the root of experiences that I've had. And I would say for you personally, it might also be the same thing. Experiences that you've had is kind of what shapes who you are, right? Your upbringing, and, you know, for the longest time when you were younger, probably was the morals that your parents and your family, your community, your church, or your school, wherever that you spent most of your time that you really valued, that all shaped who you were, but then who you've also become today. So for me, I'm actually originally from the Congo. I was born and raised in Democratic Republic of Congo in the heart of Africa. And until I was 6.5 and 7 years old, everything was pretty steady for me. And then the pictures that you're seeing right now, that's me as a little boy. I know that that gray pants is probably in style now. So if you go to American Apparel and you buy that, just let me know that you got influenced by this photo. In the middle is my mom and my brothers and I, and then on the right side is my father. Unfortunately, throughout my whole entire life, I never experienced war directly until my father was assassinated in 1997. And after his assassination, everything changed for my family. We ended up finding ourselves at a refugee camp. So I went from living a basic middle-class family in the Congo, middle-class life, going to school, having the basic necessity, to my father being assassinated after a civil war, and then my mother ending up to bringing my family and I at a refugee camp. So what you're seeing right now, this is a picture of me at a refugee camp in Western Africa. After 1.5 years of being in a refugee camp, we ended up resettling to Manchester, New Hampshire, the coldest place on earth, in February. So this is early 2000. Actually, this is not early. Yeah, early 2000. This is February 2000. So up to that point, all the different things that played out in my life actually impacted how I saw the world around me. And it also impacted where I wanted to go and what direction I wanted to take. I was just 9.5 years old when I moved to the States, but the experiences that I went to impacted me so much that it shaped who I was during that time. And then in New Hampshire, we started to build relationships with different folks that came alongside my family. And those folks earlier are the folks that actually made such an impact in our life for us to to believe that there was a plan and purpose for us to actually move forward in this country. And then I ended up going into a private middle school. And in that middle school, as you can tell, there's probably 3 Black kids in the entire school. And part of that experience, I found myself having to educate my friends a lot about my background and who I was and where I came from. I would assume it was probably so much different from my friends. 1, the fact that I was Black, but 2, the fact that I was from a completely different continent. There was a lot of ignorant things that were said early on, but I always found myself very grounded because I knew for sure where I came from and what I overcame. So when an opportunity came up, I always spent time educating my friends on who I was and what I care about. And sometimes I had to kind of hold on the ground a little bit. I ended up joining an organization early on called Youth with a Mission. It was an after-school program where the local church where I went to, they did a summer program. And during those summer programs, they would travel in inner city America all over, and they would do dances and drama. And that was my exposure to inner city America, where it actually took me out of New Hampshire. So the first year I went to Chicago. The second year I went to Philadelphia. So every summer I'll give up my summer to be involved with this outreach program. And this is where I learned so much about communities and different standpoint and challenges and success people were having. And that experience really impacted me. I ended up graduating from high school. I ended up graduating from middle school, ended up going to high school. And in high school, I found myself really gravitating more and more around community service and community involvement. At that point, I've been in the country for 6 years, and I've been able to develop relationships, and I was able to also see the changes of different communities and different cultures starting to move in Manchester, where early on when I moved in Manchester, Manchester wasn't as diverse. So I found myself giving back. My family found ourselves connecting other folks that came to the community with different resources in order for them to move forward. And then eventually I graduated from high school. And when I graduated from high school, I knew for sure that I wanted to move forward and pursue college so I can get a degree. So up to that point, a lot of how I saw myself and a lot of the intentions that I had to come to life. And the only way it had to come to life was by me actually applying myself in activities or engagements that helped me to move forward. By the time I got to college, I was super, super involved. Up to that point, I've been involved with that organization that I mentioned earlier for about 6 to 7 years. And during my free time in college break, I will travel to different communities all over the country to do community outreach and to speak to students. One of the things that I realized, my story was bringing a lot of hopes to people. I'll talk in large assemblies in schools in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, schools in Minneapolis. And then I ended up graduating. I ended up graduating from my undergrad with a double major. And when I graduated, it was such a big milestone for my family and I. Up to this point, we've worked so hard to continue to move forward. And now I get to graduate. And after I graduated, I decided to go back to grad school. But at that point, I was working with communities all over. I would travel and speak at large assemblies. I would look at issues that were happening for minority and immigrant communities. I would look at where some disparities that were happening within school districts and school systems, and I would be brought in to work with them. But at the same time, I still devoted time to that organization that I've been involved with. At that point, I've been involved with that organization for about 12 years. And I would go into communities and I would use dance and performing arts in order to connect with folks. And then here in Manchester, I ended up finding an organization early on called Bring It that I devoted so much of my time. And Bring It was the coolest thing because when I was growing up in Manchester, there was no platform for immigrant students to be able to congregate and learn from each other and express themselves authentically. And at Bring It, it was created for students from all different backgrounds, 4th grade all the way up to 12th grade. And I started volunteering at the program when I was a freshman in college. And then after I graduated from college, I was still involved with the program. After I started working corporately, I would still devote 1 night or 2 nights a week to work with the organization. And I bring it, one of the things that was so cool was it kept me grounded to my community. It kept me grounded to what was happening between 4th graders and 12th graders who came from all over the world to find a new home in Manchester. And one of the coolest thing about being at Bring It was it continued to give me a pulse of issues that were happening in the community where I probably wouldn't otherwise know, because at that time I was working full time. You know, I wasn't really, I was in a different kind of social class than where I was before when I was younger. But Bring It was a place where it kept me grounded, and we were continuing to build and move forward. And what you're seeing in these pictures, this is a cafeteria that turns into a dance studio every Tuesdays and Wednesday nights. And this is a picture of my Bring It family. So one of the things that I realized regarding my intention was always, I wanted to move forward. I wanted to progress forward. I wanted to work hard so I can be able to provide for my family, to provide for myself. But at the same time, I also always knew that as long as I was involved with this community, I would always find ways to contribute. And contributing not because I wanted a pat in the back, not because I wanted people to see, oh, hey, look at me, to contribute because I knew that I was able to move forward because of the responsibilities of relationships that came alongside me that said, hey, we believe in you. So I knew for sure, as long as I was still in this community, I would always be involved with this program. Today, I've been involved with the Bring It program at different capacity for the last 12 years. And I've learned so much by being involved with this community. So part of my intention has always been engaging. I want to engage with folks. I want to engage with communities because I feel that it's really important to be able to build relationships that way in order to move forward. So as we come to conclusion, one of the main thing about this presentation that I wanted you guys to take away from is that a lot of times we focus so much around our intentions. We allow our intention to kind of be the backbone of who we are, but we don't create opportunities to figure out how is our intention coming to life in order for us to actually make the impact that we want. And sometimes it will stretch you. Sometimes it will get you out of your comfort zone, but it's important to gravitate towards the actual application of actually doing than just the intention of saying, this is who I am and this is where I am. I know that we ran out of time based on my presentation, but if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me and contact me, and I would love to connect with you. I would love to kind of live this time out for if there's 1 or 2 questions that I can answer during this time.
Well, Deo, thank you so much. We do have 1 question that's come in while you were speaking. Somebody asks, how do you feel about well-meaning people who say, jokingly or not, that New Hampshire doesn't have any diversity? Some folks argue this erases the experiences of diverse people living in the state.
Yeah, I think you got to evaluate New Hampshire from where it stands, right? Meaning it was never a diverse place in the first place. So therefore, the progress that we've seen within the last couple of years, it's in reality of half of the time, it's actually resettle agencies who are bringing in new immigrants here, or family members that found rooted here, that have invited other family members to come here. So the reality is you can never measure it by where other states are, because it's taken a long time for other states and other cities to kind of move forward. But I do have to state there are pockets throughout our state where you will see neighborhoods and communities that are a little bit more diverse than others. And unfortunately, sometimes that diversity doesn't bleed out throughout the entire town or the entire city. And by that, I don't really just mean by people. I actually mean by interactions and relationships of people leveraging the fact that, hey, there are certain pockets within our town or city that is diverse. And I would say that it's less about saying that it's not diverse. It's more about leveraging who are the folks that are actually here and what do they have to offer and how can we build relationships with them in order to figure out what does it look like to actually be in a place where more people would want to come and actually stay here. Unfortunately, we've seen over the years where different groups of people would come and resettle here, and then after a couple of years, they'll move out to a different place. And there's factors behind that, right? That the fact that people would come here and find root, and then socioeconomics or not feeling like they can excel and move forward, or the cost of living might be a little bit too much for them to want to stay here, and then they end up moving somewhere else. So I think it's less about that it's not diverse enough. I think it's more about when people do come here and the people that do live here that are from diverse background, what do we need to do in order to make sure that they feel that this is a welcoming place for them to thrive?
Kind of a lead into to the next question that came in. They said, what would you say is a good first step for people to start building communities in each area of the state?
I think the first step is understanding people's stories, understanding people's experiences. I think in New Hampshire, one of the things that's interesting is people always have this, unfortunately, the people that are trying tend to have kind of a savior mentality. And in result of that, it doesn't really create a genuine way of building true relationships, right? When you build relationship, you have to come at it from a neutral standpoint, right? Like, hey, I value you for who you are. I want to learn from you. And unfortunately, sometimes because of some of the challenges new immigrants have, especially the communities that are coming from former refugees, they might have a little bit more challenge in terms of acclimating, where the needs that they face, some people that come alongside them to support them might not look beyond the needs and just really view them as humans in order to figure out, hey, what do you like to do? What kind of music do you guys like? What kind of food do you tell me about your story, where you came from? That's where it starts from. I think you got to have curiosity and you got to actually level set. You got to come at it from a neutral standpoint in order to build genuine relationships. And I would say the photos that I shared earlier about the families that came alongside me earlier, the ones that stuck with us were the ones that looked beyond the challenges that we were facing, or the fact that, hey, this was an African community where they just met us where we were and we were able to develop relationships that way. And some of those families 20 years later, we're still friends with them, So that's where, I think that's where the difference is. It's from a relationship standpoint. Like the same way you would build a relationship with someone you don't know that's Caucasian, or someone you don't know that's in the same race as you are. That's the same way you got to approach it in terms of, and it takes time. It takes time. They're going to size you up as much as you're going to size them up.
Thank you. Cassandra asks, there are so many good causes. How can you decide which causes to focus on and help?
Yeah, I think, so there's two sides of that, right? The causes, it comes with, some of the challenges that, different stuff our community face. But at the same time, I always think of it from like beyond just your resources. It's more of a commitment. There's an emotional commitment in terms of serving. And you got to figure out like, why is it important to you and how does it align with you? Yeah, by all means, I'm not saying that, you got to be emotionally committed to something, everything that you fund or you provide resources to. But I do think that there's certain things where you actually have to have a commitment to in order for you to figure out how does it align with you, because that alignment is actually what creates that true connection in terms of how you build relationships, perhaps with the folks that are actually impacted with the need or the challenges that they're facing that's driving you to want to support or provide something. And I also think that being able to provide resources is not just in terms of monetary. I also think it's in terms of spending time, right? Getting to know people, going there in that organization, volunteering, going there, talking to the people that are actually the recipients of the resources in order for you to figure out, hey, this is actually the space where I want to be at and want to commit a little bit of time in. I also think that it's really important to have that self-reflection. I think a lot of times, people don't really create the space to say, what does it mean for me? I know I'm touched by this. I know I'm impacted. I know I'm called to do something around this issue. But sometimes people don't come back to themselves and say, like, what does it really mean for me? Because I think the what does it really mean for you question and how you answer it will determine how you move about it. And I would say for me personally, things that I've been involved with in Manchester or in New Hampshire for a long time that I've committed to, it's really been around how does it connect to my value? How does it connect to who I am and who I want to be? And that's what creates that longevity, especially when you're still here, right? This is where we live and eat and breathe, and this is where we have families. Like, the longer you are committed to some of those organizations and plant yourself in, the better impact that you can make. Because sometimes it's about the bridge. Some people play that bridge where it's like, oh, let me call Will real quick. Hey, Will, this is what's happening. So-and-so, or this organization, they're going through this. I don't have the resources, but you might know someone. And that's been like a big testament for a lot of the work that I've been doing currently around the COVID. People call me up and say, hey, this is what's happening. And I just call someone else because I know them and say, hey, man, they're dealing with this issue right now. Do you know anybody? Can you play that connection? And I think that's a different commitment to that level. Sorry for the long answer, but I just think that when it's the community where we actually live in and breathe in, like, we're not guests, you know what I mean? So like the organizations that are struggling or that have challenges within our community, like, we're part of that community. So it's like, if you're going to have some sort of a commitment, that commitment has to be a little bit more than just the one-time thing. And I think understanding how people are impacted will compel you enough to figure out what your commitment is going to be in terms of supporting them.
Absolutely. And we all, I would say, have to be, active participants, in our communities, not just residents, of our communities. And, frankly, that's one of the reasons that we started holding New Hampshire Next, is to help get people, to help them, find their passions like this and get involved in, whatever area is most aligns with their values, like you said. And, the ultimate goal is to get people involved, so that they are, making those connections and ultimately putting down roots. Because when you're involved in a place, you get emotionally connected to it. And I think you're less likely to want to leave down the road if you feel that you've had an impact there. We do have another question that's just come in. When do you say no to opportunities that may actually be cluttering your vision and intentions?
Oh, that's a really awesome question. So in terms of opportunity, when do you say no to opportunities? I think it's a balance. I think for service providers, right, meaning people that are in the social service space, sometimes work and causes kind of melts together. So it's just like 24/7 that. I do think that it's very important to figure out what your capacity is during that time or that season for your commitment for that particular thing. And then as you evaluate it, you got to make a sound decision if it makes sense for you to commit to that thing or not. And I also think that sometimes what might be driving your decision might be that, hey, this particular organization, they're really doing critical work, but they just need a little bit of a lift. And I have the skills or the relationships that I feel like I can contribute during this time in order to help them get that lift. So then that might be the driver of you saying, hey, I'd rather go with this organization during this time than another organization. Sometimes it might also be just where you are, like where your own emotional capacity and physical capability for that season might be, right? You might see that there's a high need and it needs, and you're like, man, only if but then you know for sure that you don't have the capacity to commit to that level. Then you got to be honest to yourself and say, hey, you know what? This might not be the season right now. I think a lot of times people are very quick to either, there's doers who are ready to just get involved with whatever that's happening, that definitely get burned out. And I think it's very important to have that balance. That balance is very, very important. So that's why I always go back to like your own self. That's why, part of my presentation today, it was, your intention. Where do you want to be? What's pulling you? What can you contribute? And then maybe another season comes along, that you feel like you're more ready to apply yourself. One good example for me, it's like I get outreached a lot for board members, and to be in boards. And I told myself earlier that I was actually super anti-board because I've been on the ground level for so long for some of the work that I'm passionate about, that I was like, man, I'd rather be on the ground level instead of sitting on the board. And then eventually I realized, that's where the decisions are made. Sometimes that's when you can leverage and build greater capacity. But a lot of times I'm evaluating in terms of, does this make sense for right now? Is the outcome that will drive me, that will continue to help me commit, is that enough for me to want to commit right now? And then if I say yes, then I'm saying no to other stuff. And then I have to stay focused on the commitment that I've made for that particular season.
Well, thank you. And another comment, not necessarily a question, but a comment that came in saying that feeling you matter to your community is a research-supported way to reduce and prevent substance use and misuse as well. So another good benefit of being involved. So I believe, unless I've missed any, somebody chime in if I did miss a question, but I believe we've gotten to all the questions that have come in. So Deo, I'd just like to thank you for your inspirational and uplifting story and words today. I think it certainly shows the potential that we all have to make positive change in our communities, and really sets the tone for the rest of the week's New Hampshire Next sessions. So, as we're wrapping up today, would just like to once again express our gratitude to Dartmouth Hitchcock Health for their sponsorship of New Hampshire Next. And as I mentioned earlier, this is really kicking off an entire week of sessions that we're going to be having. From here on out, every day at 2 o'clock through Thursday, and then we'll be having an after hours on Friday at 5 o'clock. But excuse me, tomorrow, I hope you'll be able to join us at 2 o'clock for the next session of New Hampshire Next, when we're going to hear from 4 young changemakers of color here in New Hampshire, who are going to talk about their experiences here in the state and give us all some insight on actions that we can all take to make the Granite State more welcoming to diverse populations. So a little bit of a continuation of a theme that we've heard today as well. So it's going to be a great day, and you definitely do not want to miss it. We have a lot of sign-ups, and I think this is going to be one of our most popular and most engaging sessions. Again, that's tomorrow, 2 o'clock. If you haven't already registered, you can do so on the Stay Work Play website at stayworkplay.org. Go find the New Hampshire Next drop down under programs, and you can find it and sign up. And while we have you here, and do want to ask, I know those of you who popped in earlier got a chance to take our poll about the census. So it was gratifying to see that 80% of you have completed your census so far, and would just like to encourage everyone, if you haven't already done that, to go ahead and do that today if you can. The reason we're big on the census here at Stay Work Play is that it really helps to ensure that New Hampshire gets its fair share of federal funding for an array of programs that help young people and young families here in the Granite State. This includes everything from funds for Head Start preschool to Title I funds for local schools, to Pell Grants for college students in need, and housing vouchers for those who are unable to afford the state's very high rents. The census takes only 10 minutes to complete, and you can do so on whatever digital device you prefer. I did it on my phone, super easy, 10 minutes. And you can do that at 2020census.gov. So appreciate you letting me make that plug and that PSA. And with that, I would say thank you for joining us today. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you at 2 o'clock tomorrow right back here. Have a good one.